Hi students, and welcome to the final session for Ensure Team Effectiveness, the final resource support session that is. This is the resource support session number 3, uh, which is the final resource support for Ensure Team Effectiveness. In this session, we're going to be taking you through the information that'll help you to successfully answer the questions found in this learning activity here, Liaise with Stakeholders. So previously in the first 2 resource workshops, we've taking you through the first 3 learning activities. This one, Resource Support 3, the final resource support, we're taking you through this last learning activity here, Liaise with Stakeholders, which is just a set of 4 questions. So by the end of this session, you'll have all of the information that you need in conjunction with the first 2 resource support workshops to answer all of the learning activities, and then therefore be in a position to start to make some progress on your assessment tasks. For this subject, which is the 4th subject in the Diploma of Business and the Diploma of Management, Ensure Team Effectiveness, we have the lovely Alyssa Katana joining us today. Thank you for being here, Alyssa. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm good, thanks, Adam. Thanks for asking me back. I really enjoyed last week's session, and obviously I'm keen to continue on with yourself for this in-depth talk about liaising with the stakeholders. So thanks very much for having me.
No worries. We had a great session last time. We talked about the attributes of high-performing teams. We talked about feedback for individuals, steps to giving effective feedback. We talked a little bit about conflict. Communication was on the conversation. We were talking a little bit about different communication styles and methods. And yeah, encouraging a consultative work environment. Just following on from the first session where we were talking a little bit about teams, definitions of teams, what makes teams tick and things like that. So this is the final learning activity for this subject, Ensure Team Effectiveness. Um, shall we just jump straight into it?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, let's absolutely.
All right,
Four nice questions to finish the learning activities off. Great.
cool. So and I've got some learning materials to point students towards in reference to this set as well. So we'll just go through it systematically and we'll see how we go. So this
Sounds
first,
good.
so this first question for students, question 1, explain how you would use a team meeting to focus on solutions to issues or problems that may have been raised by employees. So explain how you would use a team meeting to focus on solutions to issues or problems that may have been raised already by an employee.
Mm. And I think the the real big focal point on that particular question is really using the team meeting to focus on solutions to issues or problems. So it's not using the team meeting to really, I guess, just kind of talk about them, but it's really based on how you're going to work together with your team members to be able to find the solution to issues or problems that they've actually been raised. So I think that's the key term there, that solution.
Yeah, there's some great, there's something actually really helpful for students on this one. And in the learning materials, if you scroll down almost to the bottom, there's a word called solution, which is the word of the day for this question, and then focused teams. So I would suggest students to go through this. Just before I go through this information, there was some stuff that I'd found on how to make team meetings effective. In previous installments of the diploma program, I think we've had subjects before that focus all about team meetings. We don't have one subject wholly and solely based around team meetings, but a couple of ways I guess team meetings can be more effective is by having things like a plan for that meeting. We call that an agenda in the meeting world. So having an agreed agenda that everybody in the team can prepare for. So for me, if I'm invited to a team meeting to focus on solutions. So we've got an issue that's been raised. Someone in the team's already said, look, I've discovered we've got a few issues with this or that. By having an agenda or having a plan for that meeting, it actually enables me as a member of the team to sort of think about some things I want to say, maybe do some research, maybe try a few ideas. I might have already had a few ideas that I was thinking through in my mind. It gives me an opportunity just to flesh those ideas out before I come into the meeting. So having an agenda or being prepared actually allows your members of your team to sort of also prepare themselves a little bit for, contributing to, the solution, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having an agenda, I think they're always, just to get buy-in from your team as well. It's important that they understand the purpose of the meeting. So having an agenda, you're right, gives them the respect that they need to be able to give them the opportunity to go out and research different solutions or, research some of the challenges or issues that might have been risen. And I think it is a really great
Yeah.
solution-focused tool, that agenda. People know what to expect. They know what they're going into.
Yep.
It gives them a bit more time to kind of, offer some solutions or offer some additional information around that particular topic.
And you can be really inclusive, so you'll make sure that everybody contributes to the conversation. So you actually put time aside for everybody to, to put forward their ideas or their thoughts um, on the situation too. So by having a bit more of a formalized meeting, as it were, that formality will actually assist in in getting some solutions together. But just having a look at this solution-focused teams, I might just read this out because I think this is a really good thing for students to see and be aware of as well. So I'll just actually read it straight off the page. Often, when working with teams, we feel that by analysing the problems thoroughly, bringing tensions and conflicts to the surface, and identifying mistakes and weaknesses, somehow we will help the team find a resolution. One outcome of this is that we become expert in problems, and usually this means digging ourselves a deeper hole instead of moving forward in a positive way. The more we talk about the problem, the bigger and more complex it becomes. A useful model of intervention, which takes a radically different line, is based on a solution-focused approach. This model was developed in the early 80s by Stephen DeShazer and Insoo Kim Berg from their research in effectiveness of different methods in couple and family therapy. Since then, solution-oriented working has been increasingly employed in business development and team working. So it's interesting that there's a family based sort of therapist that has come up with this idea of just a different sort of line or a different approach, a different focus. So what we're talking about here is a solution focus. So the advantage of this approach is exploring past experiences of success gives you a more positive picture of the team. The potential of the team becomes clearer. New images about what the team can become start to develop. It creates trust, takes away fear of being embarrassed or criticized. Let's actually just go down to what it means, because I think, it's actually, as it says here, best illustrated in the way that we use questions to find out more. So that's what we kind of mean by solution focus. It's just a method of reframing our thoughts and the questions that we ask to be about, about the fix, about the solution, not about the problems and on all the issues. So as
Yeah,
this, yeah. So did you
Yeah,
want to?
I definitely agree. Yeah, it is about changing that perception of how you perceive things, and it's always interesting. You were mentioning before that the theory of that solution-focused team kind of comes from a background of people that have dealt with family therapy and all those types of things, because essentially a team is no different to a team, whether it be a husband or wife or partners or whatever. There's still team dynamics, and kind of taking that theory and putting it into the workplace, it is definitely valid, and definitely it is very much about perception. Like you find that in a lot of teams, there are quite negative-based people, which causes a lot of issues when it comes to the dynamics. I mean, it is about how you ask that question and how you approach it. We've often talked about the concept of instead of bringing me a problem, bring me a solution. We have a lot of people that how did the problem arise? They really, really focus on the problem, but, you want to really focus on that solution. And you're right, it is in the questioning. It's how you ask the questions and how you direct the thought process of your team, which you've just highlighted there.
So
I find that
yeah,
very interesting.
I'll
Yeah.
get you just to explain what we have on the table here, Lisa, because this is exactly what you're talking about. So the questions in the left-hand side are you know, it's really about the past. So a solution focus is all about shaping the future, so looking into the future. So have a look at these questions and maybe just explain to students what we have on the screen here.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you've got no analytical questions about the past. So the questions that have got obviously on the left-hand side is, how did the problem arise? Who caused the problem? Why did she do that? What is the worst aspect of this issue? Why? Essentially we cannot change what's happened in the past. really can't change. There's no point in, I guess, really focusing on what has happened. The focus now, and in a really, really good, strong team environment, and we talked last week about high-performing teams. They're driven by solutions. They work together not to focus on what's happened in the past, but to really be able to grab hold and structure and shape that future. So you use questions like, what do you need to solve this problem successfully? When a miracle happens and all your problems are solved satisfactorily, what exactly will be different? How could she behave differently in the future? Now, what exactly should be different in the future? So the questions are really directed at thinking about what you can do, and you can control as a team what happens tomorrow, but you can't control what has already happened. So let's
Mm,
forget about the past. I mean, there, because it kind of holds us back a little bit, but
yeah.
let's take control of what we know we can control. So changing the perception, and and a good leader when it comes to a strong team will hopefully use those techniques of really changing that perception, asking questions, asking different types of questions.
Absolutely. And look, this is all in the context of teams, and we know that high-performing teams, they do air conflict and so on and so forth. But what you're saying is really it's just about framing it. So instead of, framing it from looking at everything from the past and focusing on the negatives, it's really about, okay, so we've got an issue, we're airing it, but now we're focused our energies on what happens next. How do we handle it?
Mm.
So, when you've mentioned this question as example, why did he or she do that? The question is, how could he or she behave differently in the future? You see how it totally takes the energy off, you know, you've made a mistake, you've done the wrong thing, and that can really upset people in a team. But also negativity breeds negativity as well. It's just likely to create a whole environment of negativity. So it's really just about asking the questions in a different way to get, some very, very different answers.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of teams. It's sometimes easier to focus on the past than it is to kind of look for the future, and ask the right questions. And I encourage all the students out there to challenge your own thought process, and ask those questions that are different, and ask those questions that are more directed towards finding the solution rather than analysing, reviewing, hashing and rehashing the past. Challenge yourself. If you're ever in a situation where you are invited into a team meeting, try asking these questions, and see
Mm.
what kind of what kind of dynamic that'll change in the actual work group itself or the team.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm.
So there you go, guys. You've got a really good um, page to go to there and some good information there to answer that first question. So how to use a team meeting to focus on solutions to issues or problems that may have been arisen by employees. You've got a couple of angles to work on. Don't mind if students have come up with their own or want to reflect on some different leadership practices or anything like that that they think can would be of benefit in answering this question, by all means. But there's some information there for students nevertheless.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Okay.
next question. Do you want to read this one?
Mm. I'd love to read about this question. Okay, so the second question there is, what are the key steps to team accountability in inverted commas, or in little whatever those little things are? Now, what is your role as the leader in encouraging accountability? So there are definitely two elements to this question, and it's posing a very, very big concept. I mean, what are the key steps to team accountability? And I think Adam's going to show us some resource information when it comes to team accountability.
Yeah,
But it's quite a big, it's quite a challenge to have a group of team, a group of people, within a team. And how do you drive that? How do you make them accountable? How do you embrace that accountability culture?
spot on.
It's a very interesting discussion. But what have you got for us on your screen there, Adam?
Yeah, so the learning materials, it's actually quite cool. It talks about steps to accountability here. It's written in really small writing, but it talks about above the line behaviors and below the line behaviors. So when we're talking about steps, it's not like that there's a flow chart, a process, do this first, do this second. There's not really, we're dealing with human beings, it's hard. It's more just sort of a philosophy of how to act and behave in order to sort of, demonstrate the right stuff for team accountability. And yeah, so actually for students that may or may not be aware, in the learning materials, there's a lot of interactive materials. So if I actually click on this, it should open up a video.
Have you ever wondered why some people behave, think, and act
Oh.
under the same circumstances?
Okay, so just to let students know, there are a range of different ways to take in the materials. But in essence, the above the line behaviors that are talked about in that little short video that we just showed you, see it, own it, solve it, and do it. So this is the philosophy for a leader or for teams to act in that with mutual accountability, and really understanding that they're the behaviors that we're trying to promote and encourage, whereas what we call the below the line behaviors is wait and see, it's not my job, finger pointing, tell me what to do, ignore/deny, or cover your tail. So doing these things here is not acting in the best interests of the team, and it's not being accountable, what we call mutual accountability, which is what we discussed in the first workshop, which is really the definition of the team, that we're all responsible for each other's success. And to truly be responsible for each other's success, these are the things you can't do. And these are the things that you can't encourage as a leader as well.
Definitely.
So I'm happy for students just to go through and have a look at that little video there now in order to answer this question.
And I think it's fair also to say, I guess what that slide is that, in a team environment, you will have people that will be, wait and see people, or, tell me what to do people, or it's not my job people, or ignore and deny people, or finger pointing people, or cover your tail people. I think that if you look at a team and you look at who is in the team, and I'm sure, Adam, you and I, have both encountered, different types of and different behaviours that people take into a group situation, and it can be quite difficult sometimes to, work above that line, which is obviously those see it, own it, solve it, do it, because the challenge will come from the people that exist below the line. So, as a leader, you have to really manage that accountability and really change that perception of what people, what people's behaviours are. So it can be it can be very challenging, I think, working in a team as well. But ideally, I believe that, if you are keen to make a change and you're keen to be different and you're keen to work, as a leader that is responsible for a high-performing team, then it really is about you making that commitment to making those changes and driving that change in your team, which I think is definitely doable.
And as a leader, you've got to also provide, we talked about acknowledging style feedback last week, so the different styles of feedback. Sometimes feedback just comes in the form of, you're doing a great job, or that's fantastic. That's exactly what the sort of behaviors that we want to see demonstrated on this team, well done. That just reinforces that sort of positive behavior that you're looking for. So, using those sort of mechanisms is always helpful in this situation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're very simple. Like, we talk about them, and, we talk about the ideas and the concepts of things like feedback and owning something, and, working together and having trust and respect for, team members. And it can quite often, as easy as it is to discuss, it can be very challenging to actually implement it when it comes to an actual group of people, especially if you're managing that group of people. But I think sometimes we forget about those really simple things, like you said, like feedback. It's a great tool, and maybe it's not used as well or as effectively as it should be, but it's such a powerful tool when it's used so correctly as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sounds good. Well, let's get the students to watch that video, because but yeah, between what we've just discussed there, they'll have more than enough info for that question. Question 3. This is something that the students will need to pay a bit of attention to. They will be asked to reflect on this in, I think it's the first or second, one of the 2 assessment tasks for this subject. I can't remember which one. Actually, it was the first one. Yep. There's a short video in the first assessment task, and the guys are actually, it's just about a team. and the team go through a few different stages, and the students are actually asked to reflect on that for this question. So anyway, I'm jumping ahead without actually being in the present. This question number 3 is explain why understanding each of the stages of the Tuckman model can help you lead a team effectively. Did you want to lead the way on this one at all, Alyssa?
Sure. Do you have a little slide on the Tuckman? Now, I mean, I think
Yes.
the Tuckman model or the Tuckman theory is really looking, as Adam's got up there, those 4 stages of team development. So
Yep.
I guess when we talk about this, and for you out there, you might have heard, the 4 stages: forming, storming, norming, and performing. It's something that is actually used quite a bit in different courses, and kind of does tend to appear in quite a few different different things that you might read. But what it does is it outlines the progression of a team. So
Yeah.
essentially, that very first stage where they actually start to form and the challenges that can arise there, right through to how they eventually get to becoming a really high-performing team. Now,
So,
in
Alyssa,
any,
we've got a
yeah,
whole heap of dot points on this page that I might get you to go
sure,
through. What I might do is
yeah,
I
I'd
might
love
just I'll give you the little explanation of each category, and then maybe you
to.
can read out some of these dot points that actually sort of focus on that stage. So, is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, of course, definitely. Yeah, no, let's
So
take them through forming, storming, norming, and performing.
they
I
actually
just
should have
like saying,
they actually
yeah,
should have numbered this as well, because it doesn't start anywhere on the grid. It starts specifically at forming. That's actually the first stage of any team development. All teams will find themselves in that stage at the start. And forming, it is that initial stage. It's where team members, they come together. There's very little trust amongst the team at the start. People can be quite careful in how they act in this stage. I mean, if ever you remember being in a brand new team, so maybe you've started a new job and there's an induction program and there's 5 other new people around you, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about forming. It's that initial stage where everybody's on their best behavior in this forming stage. Everybody's very polite, positive. There might be a bit of anxiety as people haven't fully understood what the team is there to do. Um, yeah, do you want to go through some of these dot points that we have here on this
yeah, sure.
first stage forming?
Yeah, so just to verify, is this in any particular? Are these columns designed to have a title, or are they just points associated with forming?
I think it's
Because they
just
seem to be
dot points. Yeah,
point. Oh, okay. All right. So obviously, as you said, in that, and again, most of you out there may be able to relate, and it can be relatable to perhaps you. I mean, if you're not, you've never been in a situation where you've joined a new work team. Maybe you've been in a situation where you've joined a new sporting team or something to that
yeah,
nature. Like it is essentially, you know, and no team will ever come together and all of a sudden become high-performing teams. They do go through these processes. So as you said,
mm,
that forming stage, which is that getting started. So you're getting to know the task and the team members. You're getting to know who has what skills and what the expectations are from other team members. You're testing each other's commitment and attitude.
mm,
You tend to focus on the symptoms and the problems that are not related to the task. So, you begin to define your tasks and your roles. You're excited about being part of something. You're anxious about the goals and what it takes to achieve them. You're suspicious about what is expected of you, and you're unsure about how your contribution will fit in with team goals. So you can see from a lot of those things that might occur in that very first stage of forming, there's a lot of uncertainty there. You don't know each other. You don't know, who's who. You don't know what skill set people are, but you're about to find out. So you start to
yeah,
create those connections and you start to build that relationship, or maybe not build a relationship, but you start to make and understand who you're going to be about to work with. So it is an essential part. It's like the bones or the structure of the team. You need to know who these people are, what their background is. You need to know what goals are about to happen. But there's also some uncertainty there as well in that
yeah.
very first stage.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but as we've mentioned, everybody's really on their best behavior in this stage. The next stage is where that just gets thrown out, and that is the
Yeah.
team moves into what we call the storming phase. That's effectively where people start to push up against the boundaries that are established in that forming stage. So
Mm.
This is, I guess, where people kind of work out who's who in the zoo, so to speak. How much can I push here? How much can we push there? What sort of latitude have we got? Um, this
Yeah.
is really the initial stage
And I
of
really
conflict.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely, and what I like is what's written actually in Understorming is that competing for control.
Mm,
I think that yeah, you kind of you're playing it a little bit safe in your very first stage, but in your second stage, you kind of start to feel a bit comfortable and you start to really test the boundaries, like you said. And
absolutely.
it's interesting that concept there of you compete for control. So those people that have very strong behaviours who are um, naturally drawn or naturally, quite not controlling, but quite, dominating personalities. I think there start to be a bit of competition there and a bit of,
Absolutely.
as you said, eventually conflict. Yeah, yeah.
So everybody discovers everybody for better or worse, really, at this stage. Um, People start, I think that fact that we've highlighted that one's a really big one. People start sort of competing for control, even on a subconscious level. There is that sort of power dynamic that happens, but um, people are really sort of putting their ideas out there where they don't seem to do that in that first stage. That forming stage, everything's nice. We're just getting the high level of what we're going to be here to do, so to speak. In that storming stage, that's where everybody sort of works out, how do I fit in here? I'm competing for a bit of space. I'm trying to get my voice heard over the pack. Um, that's really where a lot of all of the sort of arguing within a given team will generally happen right here in this storming phase. I think this is the
Mm.
important thing for people to know, because teams often derail at this point. This is the stage where many teams actually will fail, and that's because people are not kind of aware. And I think part of making this, or showing this for students, is that it's important to know that everybody's going to go through these phases. Sometimes these phases go, these stages happen quick. Sometimes they take, genuine periods of time, weeks or months, to go through each stage. And that's also depending on how much you're working with your other team members, if it's a daily thing or if it's only once every now and then. You might be stuck in some of these stages for a period of time. Let's
Yeah,
talk about the next
yeah,
stage. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
yeah. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, but it will pass. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
just as you said, you're right. A lot of team members, because on the actual right-hand side, you've got, if the team is in this stage, you might feel frustrated, angry, impatient, jealous. I mean, these are very strong emotions that you will feel that I think, as you mentioned, Adam, these are the contributing factors to why teams don't succeed is because people feel those emotions. But it is part of that process
Mm.
of kind of reaching that point where you will be a high performing team. It's just a natural progression of how people connect and how people start to kind of understand who each other is. So if you can stick with it, it'll you'll be on your track to kind of which is obviously the next couple of steps. It is just about kind of waiting out the storm a little bit, I think
And
sometimes.
depending on the team, depending on the personality types in the team, you're going to move through this stage at different levels of, sometimes you'll move through it really quickly. Sometimes it'll be a very, very bumpy ride getting through this stage. And that kind of depends a little bit on the personalities that you have in the group. If everybody in the group is a real driver and pushing agendas and forward, and nobody is willing to sort of, you know, go with the flow a little bit, you're going to have a lot of storming in this phase. If you have too many people that are just going with the flow and nobody's prepared to make a decision, it's also uncomfortable in this point as well. So, actually having the right balance between people can actually help this stage. But what actually happens next is what we call norming, which is effectively everything starts to become normalized. Everything starts to become normal. So this is where people resolve their differences. So we've all expressed our needs and our wants and our expectations in the storming phase. We've all had our little disputes with other team members. At this point, everybody knows each other a little bit. You may even be socializing a little bit with each other. Um, People develop a stronger commitment to the team goal at this point, and you actually start seeing some progress towards it. So
Yep, yep,
yeah, it's the stage that where all the
yeah.
team members start to develop that shared vision and start to work together towards the actual end goal.
and that's where things like your respect and your trust kind of starts to grow and develop, and
Absolutely.
you know, as it says, you feel a lot more comfortable working with people. I mean, this is the stage where you're right, you know, it comes together. It comes together, and you know, once you guys know that once you start to feel that respect and that trust, and you know that people have got your back in the team, then you know you're in the right environment, you know you're in the right group, and you're in the right team. And you know, when you have those connections, I think that's, you know, a great essence for, you know, the next step, which is obviously that performing step. But you can't have a high performing team without having that trust and that respect. As we talked about last week, we talked a lot about some of the qualities of a high performing team, and you need to have that there.
And you know,
So that's when obviously that all
I
happens.
think
So
that
yeah,
that trust that you talk about, that trust is almost built because we've gone through this phase, because we've seen people
exactly
in their
right.
real element. You know, they've expressed their real desires, their real, you know, their frustrations. Their hang on, I think we should be looking at it like this. Maybe what about this? What about because everybody's put it out there and we've exposed it, and we've argued, we've talked through it, we've dealt with it, we've had a bit of tension, because we've come out the other side and now people are actually working with each other. You actually do develop a bit of trust through that process because you go, you know what, I've actually just lived through that whole phase with these guys. What's the worst that can happen from here? Not much. I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with these guys that, you know, if we have a situation, we can handle it. So that's the norming stage. That's where things start to actually, you know, normalize and the team starts to work. What happens right at the
Yep.
end is that you move full speed ahead. So the team actually starts making some proper or serious progress, i.e., everybody's now working at that optimum level. Everybody's contributing. The structures, the processes that we have in place are all supported. Everybody's getting involved, and yeah,
Yep.
this is the ideal stage that we want to be getting our teams to.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's the reward that comes from all of that, you know, like forming, storming, and norming. Performing is the reward of going through, is your reward for going through those stages. It can be quite difficult, you know. You get to see the results, you get to, you know, enjoy the people that you work with. You take a lot of pride. Your outcomes and your objectives are reached, you know, and it is something that I think there's sometimes nothing greater than a really strong team that kind of have got each other's back, and you know they're performing at the same time as having very, very strong relationships and strong connections. I mean, I think that's a very rewarding experience and a very rewarding, yeah, time to you know, men teams. Yeah.
From a leadership perspective, when you're
Mm.
in that first stage informing, some of the things that you can really do to assist, and because ultimately the idea as a leader is we want to help our team push through these stages. We want to get our team performing as quickly as possible. We know that our team are going to be forming, storming, and norming before they're performing. That sounds kind of funny. So our goal as leaders is almost to be able to recognize where our team is, what stage they are at, and push them through to the next stage. So as a leader, some of the activities you can do in that first stage forming is really establish clear objectives. It's the most important thing you can do at this stage. This is the forming. This is the what are we doing here? What's the high level? What's my role in this? That's that early stage where we're all shaking each other's hands and smiling. Oh, you sound lovely. Oh, okay, great. We're going to push people through this space. So as a leader, one of the things you could do is really be very, very clear about the individual members, but also the team as a whole, what the clear objectives are for the team, and establish some processes and structures. So just, you know, put it out there, put all the processes the way that you want the team to operate from the get-go. You know, remove any ambiguity as much as possible. In that next stage, in the storming stage, I guess as a leader, you should really, I guess, be focused on solutions, is what we talked about in one of the previous questions. Focus your energies on, you know, finding solutions for issues. Focus your energy on, you know, on just allowing people to air the issues that they
Yeah.
want and need to air. It's just you've got to get through. You can't otherwise. So ignoring it's not going to work. Being there to have, you know, conversations does work. Being focused on solutions does work. They're the sort of things you should be doing as a leader.
And I think in this phase here in terms of storming, we don't talk a lot about it in this course, but things like having emotional intelligence when it comes to dealing with your team members as well. Recognizing that there will be frustration, there will be some anger, there will be some impatience, there will be jealousy amongst your team members, and understanding that a lot of people will have an emotional reaction in this
Yep,
particular phase of the team dynamic. So you using emotional intelligence to be able to manage those types of emotions will definitely help you get through this process as well.
absolutely.
Not being reactive in how you deal with people's emotions, not kind of hiding and making people hide these emotions, but dealing with them openly and giving them some tools to be able to get through this phase with these emotions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, Look, if you can understand the different sort of styles that people might have in the workforce, we're looking to do a video on this one in the next sort of few weeks as well. I'll be putting something up for students that actually caps off this first half of the course really well. It just talks about the different different behaviors at work, different sort of social styles, we call it, or people styles at work. Understanding the different styles will also help you to communicate with that particular style of person as well, which will help you push through this phase. My biggest thing on this one is don't ignore it, acknowledge it. Don't give so much credit to, there's going to be a lot of emotion, as you mentioned, Alyssa. You don't want to buy into all of that emotion per se, but you do want to acknowledge it. So if somebody's expressing a certain emotion, don't just pretend like that never happened. Even if you think it's over the top and it's outrageous, you still must acknowledge how that person feels and then focus on the solutions. So that's the storming. In the norming phase, it's actually a good time for team building activities. So as a leader, once the team have pushed through that storming phase and once the team have started to, everybody's actually starting to work. We're not perfect because we still haven't made it to that fully performing phase, but this is that point where, yeah, there is a bit of relief. We're all making progress now. We're starting to work. This is actually a good time to do some team building and to get everybody excited about working together, because that's going to actually help you push right into that final category, which is performing. Once the team are performing, your role as a leader is actually minimized. In fact, delegating tasks as much as you can is probably the best thing that you can do. You really want to involve all of your team through all of the decisions, as well, we know with high performing teams, but really delegating is a good action as a leader for this last performing phase or stage, because your team are already high performers come that point.
Yes. Hopefully they're high performers.
No doubt they are.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
exactly right.
I thought that was a good discussion. That was pretty good. So are we happy to move on to the next question?
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, I hope that's given some students some light of or some understanding of I guess how teams eventually do form, and that it is actually a process. So
Yeah. And everybody goes through it. I mean, really, everybody does go through that. So it's sort of just, it's the unavoidable. You've got to go through it. So if you feel that you're stuck in one of those stages, identify where you are and make some plans to push the team through those stages so that they can start performing, because there's a lot of anxiety for team members up until the point that people start norming.
yep,
So yeah,
absolutely. And chances are, I mean, if you're at certain stages as well in that team forming, there are probably people that feel the same way, and they may not want to tell people that they feel the same way, or that there is some frustration, or they're, at certain points in that model. So how you manage that, and how you identify those changes. I mean, and how much it can be quite an impact as well. I mean, people will have feelings that they may hide, and they might think that they're the only ones that are having those types of feelings or those types of emotions. But in theory, probably most of a team will have the same type of emotions at the same time. So how
mm,
you deal with it and how you understand where you're placed in that model, I think is quite a good way to get over any challenges you might have.
absolute, absolute. Um,
Should we have a look at that last question?
yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I'm just realizing this is a double up from the last subject. This question was actually asked in your assessment task for workforce planning, the third subject, where we talked about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. So this question is, when a team has an absence of trust, what behaviors would you observe and what might be the impact on performance. So if you remember, there was something, we talked already about this in the last subject. We talked about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. In fact, your assessment task in this third subject was to look at this, to do an analysis of your own team and to make some recommendations. So this question is actually just looking at this first dysfunction of a team, which this occurs, or absence of trust is the first dysfunction, occurs when team members are reluctant to be vulnerable with one another and are unwilling to admit their mistakes, weaknesses, or need for help. Without a certain comfort level among team members, a foundation of trust is impossible.
Yep.
So this is the first one. You actually need to just provide a strategy for this one, which is something that you've already done and dealt with in your assessment task. But actually, sorry, the question here is what might be the impact on performance. So I'm happy for students, there's a video there, I'm happy for students to just go to this page and navigate themselves around, because that's really where the information is coming from here. Yeah, and we've really already gone through this one. I'm not sure that it actually should even be included in this particular set. Did you want to add anything to this one at all? Sorry, Lucy.
No. That's fine. The 5 dysfunctions of a team: absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment. Wow. Yep.
Yep. Look, these all look. We're in the 4th subject now, team effectiveness. But if I show students, these are the 4. This is your 3rd one, workforce planning. So if you've jumped a subject, you'll note, I think it's the 3rd assessment task, workforce planning. Yeah, there's an attached questionnaire. It's all about teamwork. So
Oh, okay. Yep.
this one here, I'm just going to open it so you can see. But this one's an activity where you need to actually, go through the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and you actually need to make an assessment on your own team. You actually calculate the scores here, and then you need to just to sort of discuss, analyze results, and provide a 1,000-word summary on the strategies and the processes to get through these areas. So the students have already done a bit of work on this one leading up to this, just to give you a bit of a background there, Alyssa.
Yep. Cool. All right.
So yeah, so we'll probably leave that one for deep
Yep.
discussion because it's already included in one of the previous videos. They are the main areas that we were going to talk about today. There's a couple of other areas that I'd also just briefly like to talk about, which were, I might just start the first one. I was mentioning the other day that another element of high-performing teams is finding the right balance between what I call task and maintenance. So task roles and maintenance roles, they're the 2 different sort of activities. The task roles refers to the actions of individuals that help move the project, decision, or task along. So they are strictly based on what, when, how, all of those. They're all the things that the task-based person is concerned with. The maintenance roles a maintenance role refers to the actions of individuals that help preserve the relationships in a given group. So when you're coming together with a new team, and if you're finding yourself in a brand new team, you might find yourself stuck in that storming stage, that stage 2, if you're not getting the balance between task and maintenance right as well. And so what we mean by maintenance is somebody that's willing to get to know one another, to encourage one another, to express group feelings, to be willing to compromise, interest in harmonizing, but also just an interest in building rapport with other members of the team. So the key is to get that nice, healthy balance between the 2, where we're concerned, we're showing care, we're showing respect, we're encouraging, we're maintaining the relationship, as well as we're driving forward the direction of the task. Personally, and me myself, I tend to do the maintenance role very comfortably. It's just a natural thing for me. I tend to sort of build rapport pretty easily with people. What I've actually discovered about myself through working in teams and working in project teams is that I've actually made others a little bit more anxious, or more, I've provided additional anxiety to a group by spending too much time in that phase. So by wanting to know what people do on the weekend, by spending too much time saying, hey, so what are people doing later on this evening? So tell me a little bit about yourself. It's actually put people on. I've spent too much time previously in groups in that phase, and what I learned about myself through that process is if I actually focus my energies on the task role, I know that I'm going to do the maintenance well. I know that I'm going to show care for other human beings. I know that I'm going to just naturally get along with people and want to get to know you a bit better, and we'll have our water cooler chat and what have you. I do that stuff pretty well already. So the stuff that I need to focus on when I come into a new team, so now we're in that forming stage, everybody's getting to know each other, I need to actually change my actions to being based around the task related actions. So I need to start clarifying information. I need to start summarizing. I need to work with people to gain a consensus. I need to, be focusing my energies and efforts in all of those task roles because otherwise what I've discovered is I get the balance wrong and what actually happens is people start to think that I'm a bit of a joker, maybe I'm not serious enough, and it's not necessarily anything that's expressed, it's something that's felt and it's sort of internalized. On the other hand, quite often, and it's probably more likely that you get, quite analytical people that are focused on the task, focused on the job at hand, and have very little either time or resources or skills to be able to spend any time in that maintenance side and that relationship fostering side. And there's the reverse, effect that happens in that space. Um, yeah, some people feel like you might just be a taskmaster, that you don't really care about them, that there's no respect, that the way they're communicating with them was horrible, that you might be actually even be rude. People even might, oh, he's not really nice. Why isn't he? Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, he's always sort of just demanding things. You know, as human beings, people like to sort of, people want to get to know each other to a certain degree. We've got a job to do, but it's also important to spend a little bit of time in building rapport and showing respect for one another and getting to know one another, because that'll actually help you push through that second stage, that storming stage in any case. But the reality is you've got to get the balance. So there's got to be a nice, healthy balance between task and maintenance. So when you are in that forming and that storming stage, just have a look at yourself and what your contributions are, and just make sure that you feel that you've got a comfortable balance between focusing on the job at hand but also spending enough time in, you know, showing respect, care, um, encouragement, and building rapport and relationships with the other members of your team. Yeah, so that's the balance between task and maintenance that was actually written up by a gentleman called Tyson. That's his surname, last name Tyson. There's a book called Working Groups, which is a fantastic read if students are interested in a little bit more on that. Yeah, did you want to? There's one other thing that is going to be in the assessment task for this subject, which is talking about group behaviour and group dynamic. And the second assessment task for the students, they get given a situation, it's a scenario. I'll be talking through it in the next webinar when I actually go through the assessment support for this subject. It's a scenario where there's a conflict on your team and you've got to negotiate some solutions to that conflict. And one of the aspects of it is asking students to reflect on, it was initially actually designed as a group activity for students in a face-to-face scenario. We're in an online space, but the students are still required as per that assignment to reflect on what was it comfortable, was it uncomfortable, how did it feel having to, bring up certain issues or reflect. So one of the things the students are actually asked to reflect on is that group dynamic or that group behavior. So I guess it's something that we can also maybe just chuck on at the end of this session now, Alyssa.
No, yeah, of course, no dramas. I mean, I can give you a little bit of a background on, I guess, where the term group dynamics came from. I know, Adam, you quite like your theory, so I'm a little bit not into theory, so I'm quite interested in the theory behind the actual process of group dynamics. So, look, I guess when we think about when I think about group dynamics, I think of kind of like, those moments where perhaps you've put together a team and you're kind of all pumping and you're excited about finding a solution or working together, and then when you get into that situation, you realise that there are lots of different personalities and different behaviours, and sometimes those different personalities and those different behaviours can kind of hold the group back essentially.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we talk about when we talk about group dynamics. It really is, I guess, just, people are very different. They have different thought processes. And as we talked about before, below the line and above the line, it's people's thought processes, and I think that can make a really big impact on how people behave in those team environments, a really big impact on outcomes that teams want to achieve. So back in the early 40s, a gentleman called Kurt Lewin
Yeah.
kind of started coining the term group dynamics. You
Yeah.
know Kurt Lewin?
I've heard of him. Yeah, I've heard of.
So essentially what he did was he noted that people often take on distinct roles and behaviours when they work in a group. So group dynamic describes the effects of these roles and behaviours on other group members and on eventually, I guess, the group as a whole. When we come together, when we work individually, we could be very different, but when we work together, I guess we come together. We come together with a series of different ideas. We come together, with a series of different behaviours that we might drag with us. We have different roles within that group, and we bring all of those together in a group scenario, and we have a group dynamic. And how we work together and how we work with different people can be very, very different, and it can make quite dramatic impact, or take quite a dramatic impact on the actual the actual outcomes, I guess, that we want to achieve when we are in a group. So the
So,
dynamic of something.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to ask you, what are some reasons why you might get some poor dynamics, or what are some ways to improve some of the team dynamics, or even ways to identify when it's happening?
Yeah, look, I think that probably if we look at something like a poor group dynamic, what might cause a poor group dynamic? So if you have, a team that might lack a really strong leader, I think sometimes.
Yeah.
So sometimes, especially in that, we talked about the forming stage, I think, when people get together as a group, I think it's important, as we mentioned, to have a really strong leader, because if you haven't got that strong leadership, I think that there can be sometimes people that are more dominant that might take charge.
Yep.
There can be a blur in the roles and responsibilities that people have. Some people have different ideas of outcomes if they don't have a really clear defined leadership role. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah,
Like, if you've
absolutely.
got that poor leadership, you can cause poor dynamics, because I think kind of coming into that that forming stage, you need to have strong leadership characteristics, and then things like emotional intelligence, understanding who your team members are, and that'll help kind of, I guess, get the team and the group kind of in the right frame of mind and focused on what actually needs to be done.
It's interesting, isn't it? Just that
Yeah.
any given team can develop its own personality as a group. So individually, we're individuals, but when we're all put together, there's a dynamic or a personality that the whole team actually work from or work with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is quite unique. I mean, if you ever see, I think it's hard to get the perfect team right. I mean, we can have very strong individual performers in a workplace, and if we put those very strong individual performers together, we assume that we will get a very strong performing team. But quite the opposite, because
Yeah.
what we don't take into account is we don't take into account the behaviours and the ideas, and the emotional triggers behind each of those individuals. And when they get brought into a group, the dynamic between those different personalities and those different behaviours can be very, very disruptive to actually the group itself. So it is quite interesting sometimes to actually consider those types of things.
Absolutely. There's something called groupthink, which I've heard about, which is it's effectively, yep, sorry, somebody's just tapped me on the shoulder. I've got to get out of this office right now. Um,
Oh,
yeah, it's when the group effectively will make a consensus on a decision. Um, sorry, just got to get out of
yeah.
this office right now.
Oh, have you?
Yeah, I've just realised I've actually overbooked somebody else's time. Oops, I better go.
Yeah, no. So definitely that groupthink is definitely, I think, a result of, people not wanting to fully like put their own ideas and their own opinions in there, and they're probably the thought process of the many kind of outweighs their thought process as an individual. So,
That's exactly well,
you know,
perfectly said,
yeah,
beautifully said,
yeah,
beautifully
yeah,
said.
yeah.
Um, I've got to
And
wrap this
yeah,
session up, Alyssa. I'm really, really sorry, but I've got to roll. But is there anything else that
no,
you wanted to add to group dynamic or behaviour at all?
no, I'd just say just make sure, as we talked about before, strong leadership skills, considering who your team members are, understanding, the behavioural patterns and understanding who they are, and not necessarily thinking that a group of high-performing individuals will make a successful team. It is about those connections, about those behaviours, and a group of people that come with that information and those behaviours and those ideas together. So consider all your team members individually,
It's
and that'll create a better dynamic.
it's
Yeah.
about that power dynamic as well, because some people won't want to challenge, and that's sort of what I was trying to get at before. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, that groupthink really, people don't really want to challenge the status quo if they feel that they're not in a position of authority to be able to actually do that as well. So that's another side effect as well.
And that's when we talk about, like, breaking down barriers in a really successful group and building trust and confidence, and having people consult and communicate, and having accessibility to, a kind of almost a level type of hierarchy. I mean, that's going to build that trust, and that's going to remove that, that group think mentality, and be more positive in terms of, outcomes and ideas and concepts and trust in the team. Yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds good. That was a great explanation.
So I think you need to jump ship on me. So I think we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, we will. We will. All right, guys. Thank you very much for your attendance in today's session. The next session, session 4 for this, will be the final one, which will be our our assessment support. So I'll be taking through the 2 assessment tasks for this subject. Thanks for your attendance. And yeah, Alyssa, thanks for joining us in this session as well. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Adam. You take care.
Okay,
Bye
see you
now.
next time. Thanks, guys.